Should wine competitions give judges the option to say that none of the wines in a category deserve a medal? Why have some classic wine regions become inaccessible while others remain within reach, price-wise, for wine drinkers? And what does it mean for a wine to gain wisdom as it ages? In today's episode, you'll hear the stories and tips that answer those questions in part 2 of our chat with Neal Hulkower. You don't need to have listened to part 1 from last week first, but if you missed it, go back and have a listen after you finish this one. By the end of our conversation, you'll also discover one biostatistician's objection to the way wine competitions are scored, why Neal fundamentally disagrees with the idea that some judges' opinions should carry more weight than others, why he applied these ranking methods to historic tastings like the Judgment of Paris and what those results revealed, what revisiting his tasting notebooks from the 1960s and 70s revealed about wine prices, aging, and accessibility, and how Neal set a personal ceiling on wine prices and how that shapes what he considers drinkable. Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 377. First, let's talk holidays for your calendar. This week kicks off with February 18th, National Drink Wine Day. Pop that bottle you've been saving, host a blind tasting with friends, or try One Grape, Three Textures flight with still, sparkling, and dessert versions of the same variety. Fun fact, vermouth is technically a wine, not a spirit, so that counts. February 19th is National Chocolate Mint Day, which calls for grasshopper cocktails or a late harvest Riesling alongside your after-dinner mints. February 20th doubles as National Cherry Pie Day and National Muffin Day. Turn muffins into pairings by matching blueberry with off-dried Riesling. I seem to have off-dried Riesling on the brain. Chocolate chip with ruby port, or a savory cheddar chive with brisk cider. February 21st is National Sticky Bun Day, the perfect excuse for a late afternoon coffee and ice wine moment. February 22nd brings National Margarita Day. Go beyond the frozen blender classic with a mezcal version for smoky depth, a spicy jalapeno-infused rim with tagine, or a hyper-Canadian snowbank margarita with a salted maple rim. Host a margarita flight with progressively weirder Canadian twists like dill pickle brine or clamato rims. Trivia time, margarita is Spanish for daisy, and the drink is likely a riff on a Victorian cocktail. February 23rd is National Banana Bread Day. I love banana bread. Whenever I'm traveling, the way I treat myself is I go to Starbucks for one of their overpriced banana bread. Anyway, it pairs beautifully with aged rum, cream liqueur and coffee, or tawny-style dessert wine. It's also National Cupcake Day, so match Prosecco with red velvet or Moscato with a lemon curd. February 24th wraps up the week with National Tortilla Chip Day and World Bartender Day, so do a global dip tour matching each dip to a different beer style or a crisp Albarino, and tip your bartender generously. What's new in the drinks world? Brock University's Covey Institute is pioneering research into the Itasca grape, a cold-hardy hybrid designed to maintain premium quality despite extreme weather swings. At this week's Wine Paris Fair, Dr. Jose Valamaz announced a DNA discovery connecting a grape variety between Turkey and Hungary across 3 centuries. The research from Pasili Winery revealed genetic links nobody expected. The grape is Kolorko, an almost extinct Turkish variety from the Thrace region. The DNA profiling revealed the grape is genetically identical to ferment, Hungary's iconic white grape responsible for the legendary wines of Tokai. The historical connection is fascinating. After Francis II, Rákóczi lost the Hungarian War of Independence against the Habsburgs in 1708. He fled to the Ottoman Empire and lived in exile in Turkish Thrace for 18 years with a large Hungarian entourage. The theory is that the nobles brought ferment vine cuttings from Tokai during this exile. The winery rescued Colorocco from near extinction over the past 20 years, finding just a handful of forgotten vines in farmers' vineyards. They've been making this varietal wine since 2009. Despite being genetically identical, Colorocco and ferment taste different today. The Mediterranean climate and the calcareous soils of Turkish Thrace versus the continental climate and volcanic soils of Tokai create distinctive wines. Plus, after 3 centuries apart, both varieties have likely accumulated somatic mutations. Ooh, I love saying that, somatic mutations. Bodily so. Meanwhile, a bizarre climate anomaly has been reported in the Alexander Valley of California, where the first grape bud break of 2026 occurred in late January, leaving growers scrambling to protect tender shoots from the unpredictable February frosts. Major cocktail trends for the year include flash carbonation of entire cocktails, not just adding bubbles to one ingredient, but carbonating the whole drink, milk punches made with yogurt and clotted cream. Garnishes are gravitating toward purposeful and bold, like fresh baked bread infused with fortified blueberries and strawberry fruit crisps made by local pastry chefs. Archaeological chemists recently analyzed 9,000-year-old clay shards from a Chinese village and discovered traces of the world's oldest cocktail, a fermented blend of rice, honey, and hawthorn fruit that would have packed about a 10% alcoholic punch. In a move to modernize the sad solo drink, a high-end tech bar in Las Vegas has debuted a robotic bartender that uses facial recognition to detect unhappy customers and proactively suggests a cheer-up cocktail with a personalized joke on the side. Just me and my AI. On social media, fans are buzzing over a quirky post from the boutique Monashee Spirits Distillery in Revelstoke, BC. They used a hidden camera to show a local beer judging of their botanical waste, a humorous nod to their sustainability efforts. They've gained a huge following for capturing local wildlife interacting with the distillery's surroundings. The judging video was a witty way to highlight their circular economy. They often compost their spent gin botanicals like juniper, citrus, and mountain herbs, or provide them to local farmers. In the post, the bear is seen meticulously sniffing out the spent mash pile. A Russian distillery has released a limited edition vodka specifically designed not to freeze until it hits minus 27 degrees Celsius, and it's marketed as tundra-proof for those who prefer their shots served at Arctic temperatures. In other extremes, the world's strongest beer, snake venom, currently clocks in at a staggering 67.5% alcohol by volume, so high that the brewery actually puts a yellow warning label on the neck advising drinkers not to exceed 1 35 ml measure per sitting. That's equivalent to only 2 teaspoons. In a bizarre case of breathalyzer physics, a student party in Maryland was so saturated with alcohol vapors that the air inside the house itself tested positive on a police breath-sensing device. Did you know that the human body can actually produce its own alcohol? It's called endogenous ethanol production, where the bacteria in your gut ferment carbohydrates into tiny amounts of booze. So technically, you're always a little bit spirited, even when you're stone cold sober. Then there is a rare condition called autobrewery syndrome, where a person's own gut microbes ferment the carbohydrates they eat with enough ethanol to cause a measurable intoxication, effectively turning their body into a tiny internal brewery. It is vanishingly rare and more medical mystery than party trick, but the idea that some people could, in theory, get tipsy from a bowl of pasta without a drop of wine makes for an irresistible reminder that biology can out-weird even the wildest cocktail menu. Researchers have discovered that up to 70% of the wine's final character is shaped during fermentation long before any aging begins. And different yeast strains can alter a wine's aromatic profile by as much as 40%. That means microscopic fungi doing the work in those tanks have more influence on what you smell and taste than almost anything else. The yeast are the real winemakers. New research published in Microbial Biotechnology, must get a subscription to that, explores how winemakers might design custom yeast communities using synthetic metagenomes to precisely engineer flavor profiles. They argue that understanding the ecological dynamics of fermentation could unlock genetic potential for developing entirely new wine styles. On upcoming TV shows, we'll be chatting about fresh wines for spring, St. Patrick's Day beer and spirits, and environmentally sustainable drinks for Earth Hour and Earth Day, as well as those for Easter, Mother's Day, and Father's Day. Let me know if you'd like your brand featured on these TV segments or future ones, or if you'd like to advertise with us through our podcast, newsletter, website, social media, or mobile apps. Please email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com. I'm sharing more tips and sips on Instagram at Natalie McLean Wines. Join me there for more of the weird and wonderful. Back to today's episode. 3 of you will win a copy of Neal's new book. If you'd like to win, just email me and let me know you'd like to win. It doesn't matter where you live. I'll choose 3 winners randomly from those who contact me. Keep these books for yourself or give them as gifts. If you're reading the paperback or ebook or listening to the audiobook of my memoir, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much, a national bestseller and one of Amazon's best books of the year, I'd love to hear from you at natalie@nataliemclean.com. I'll put a link in the show notes to all retailers worldwide at nataliemclean.com/377. Okay, on with the show. And now back to that Borda. A Yale statistician, Dominic Cicchetti, launched a heated attack on using the Borda count in wine competitions. What did he disagree with there? Why did he say it wasn't the right way to choose winners and losers?
So unfortunately, he died. It's very sad. I really like the guy. He's a biostatistician. I'm a mathematician. We're not cut from the same cloth exactly. And he, in fact, had written about the Judgment of Paris and analyzed the scores as a statistician, came up with the conclusion that there was essentially no difference between the first and second place. I actually mentioned his work in my paper. But what he doesn't like, let me give you a version of his example, which I think is absolutely brilliant to show the distinction between his perspective and one that's strictly ordinal. He has an example where he has 5 tasters scored 3 wines. One of them has scores in the 60s, 2 in the 70s, and 2 in the 90s. Those clearly show 3 different levels of goodness for the wines. If you convert those to rankings and use Borda, that intensity of preference disappears.
Right. That this wine is so much better than that wine, the wine that were scored in the 90s.
The guys who ranked in the 90s thought so much more of those wines than the guys in the 70s, and so much more of it than the guys in the 60s. That information is lost. Now, he was of the school that there were people whose opinion should count more. I'm not. And so there was some difference there. But in dealing with his objection, it's a reasonable objection, there were 2 different things that I suggested over time. One is you can actually introduce with Borda, and I wrote a separate peer-reviewed paper on this called The Power of None. You can introduce none as an option, and you can insert that anywhere in the ranking.
What does the none mean? Like 0?
Well, let's talk in terms of political candidates without mentioning names, because it's a little bit easier. Suppose you have a slate of candidates that you have to choose from and you don't like any of them, but you're in a jurisdiction where you have to rank them, because we have that now in the United States. Poorly done, but we have it. You should be able to say none as your option.
That you don't want to vote for anybody.
You don't want to take them, and then
Okay.
have everybody else ranked underneath that. So the paper that I wrote with my friend John Neutrauer, who got me into wine, examines that in great detail and the implication. Generically, it doesn't specifically call out elections, but it can also be used for wine. So suppose that the judge who ranked the wine in the 60s really didn't like any of them, but was compelled to rank them. He could put in none as the first and rank the others underneath. Whereas those in the 90s would have none at the bottom because they liked all of them, right? Guys in the 70s might have none in between. And then you aggregate and none turns up where it is in the overall ranking.
And because if there were 3 judges who said none for all of them, would that avoid wine competitions not giving... It seems to me sometimes wine competitions give a medal to everybody just for participating.
Right.
So if it's a weak category, you're going to get a gold if you're the best in a weak category. Whereas this, it seems, would say, actually, nobody measured up. There shouldn't be medals given out for this one.
That's precisely what it can do. I don't know if you want to get into this now, but very recently in this past year, a wine economist colleague of mine, Jeff Boddington, came up with, I think, a brilliant way to handle this, and it's called stars and bars. Let's go back with a very simple example. Let's say that there are 3 judges, and using the Borda count, there's a wine that gets a total Borda score of 9. So how can you get to 9? Each one gave it a Borda score of 3. You could have a Borda score of 1, 1, and 7. You could get 4, 4, 5, and 0.
Dragging
and so
everybody
on.
Down to an average or whatever.
Yeah. But what's really important here, what was the thing that Dom was objecting to? He was objecting to the fact that a ranking is simply that. It doesn't give you any sense of the strength of preference with that ranking. So none works, sort of. You still have the issue of strength of preference, although the place in the final ranking is a strength of preference. What's nice about stars and bars and the analysis that Jeff came up with is that it adds a second dimension beyond simply the ranking. And that dimension is the strength of preference. If all 3 of them gave that wine 3, that's stronger than if 2 of them gave 1 and 1 gave 7. There's a spread there, which means, yeah, the one guy who might be a super taster or not, again, I don't believe in it, but some folks do, really loved that one. The others 2 said, no, doesn't do it for me. So there's a wider distribution. If you had 2 2s and a 5, that's a little tighter. You get the picture that if you look at how that ranking of 9 is arrived at and how it can be arrived at, that gives you another piece of information that can help you appreciate how strong a preference that wine was appreciated by the judges.
Fascinating. Wow. And here I thought, well,
but you understood me, right?
It's like, yes, I did. I understand it.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
I almost don't want to touch it, though.
Okay.
Like, no, I get it.
I hear you.
I'm more of a lit major, but anyway. So you applied that as well to the judgment of Paris, the Borda method, and got similar results. But let's go on to the conference where you received one of the 3 coveted Christoph Barron prizes for best conference presentation in Tbilisi, Georgia, the country, not the state. It was, what can I still afford to drink? Now, what was this? This was a different topic, correct?
I bounce around a lot. I joke that I have a short attention span, but that can be disproven. So these notebooks here that I talk about provided me remarkable data on my tasting history between 1969 and 1979. I drank some fabulous stuff back then. classified growths, aged Burgundies. You could pick up a 25-year-old Burgundy for $19. Granted, it's still a lot of money, but still. And I said, wonder if, first of all, if any of those wines are still available, and if so, what would they cost? And if not, is there something similar that's out there, similar age that I could afford? So this was originally an article that I wrote for Wine Searcher, and it came out under the name of, I think, The Cost of Tasting Wine History or something like that. And I said, gee, it's kind of fun. I like my title better than the one that was given, but
I do too.
yeah, and I like giving talks at the wine economist meeting. And I said, maybe I should do this. So I wrote it up. COVID hit, the meetings were canceled. I didn't go to Vienna, and so I dug it out, did another talk where I used Borda to look at the tasting that resulted in Domaine Drouhin happening in Oregon. And so I had two talks in Tbilisi. I did an analysis. I went through Wine Searcher again to see what was available, how much it cost, did all of my descriptive statistics. And then I also had my current inventory, which I keep in a spreadsheet. And I looked at the maximum price I paid for a bottle of wine. And I said, okay, that represents the limit. Empirically, this is the most I paid, and that's the most I'm willing to pay. And then I took a look to see what else was available that was at that or below that price. Turned out there was some. Anything that wasn't exactly what I had, and it could have been because it would have been over the hill or too expensive, or I looked for something of comparable age for when I had it. And I did the same kind of thing. I looked to see if it fell under that number.
Wouldn't they have all increased, though? Wines of, at least decent wines of the vintage you had in your stockpile, wouldn't they have all gone up?
Yeah, but there were a couple that didn't. And also, I'm sure you're familiar with Wine Searcher. That's a dynamic website. So you can go back an hour later and things change. When I wrote the article, I did the analysis. And then when I did the presentation, I went back and did the analysis all over again. Things indeed had changed. That Trockenbeeren Auslese, which of course could survive the number of years, was instead of $85 or $200, I think initially was $3,600. And then when I looked at it again, it had dropped a little bit, possibly because it was fading. I don't know. That's not what I would pay for a bottle of wine.
So did that make you say I should never open it, or that?
Well, I think you should open it because it could be, 59, that's a long time ago. It could be,
Yeah,
it could be going down. I mean, it would still be awfully good, but we did, by the way, have a bottle of that 70 Haut-Brion to celebrate the publication of the paper. I was actually able to acquire one that was in good shape for a reasonable amount of money. It was 39 years old when we opened it. And I still have the bottle, and I framed it along with the reprint of the article, and then my friend John's comments on it. It was terrific, but it was definitely starting its decline.
I'll bet. How much did you have to pay for it?
I think it was $200 or something like that.
Oh,
It
that's a
wasn't
deal.
outrageous.
Yeah.
It was not outrageous.
Bordeaux, yeah.
I was shocked.
So what was your conclusion with the presentation? What can I still afford to drink? Not much? Or what was the...
More than I expected.
I just have this vision that Bordeaux, Burgundy, they've all gone crazy, even in the last 5-10 years.
German wines don't. And again, using that thing, well, what would it cost for me to get a 15-year-old claret or German wines versus the one that I had when it was 15 years old, but it was from, 1947 or whatever it was. But I used that also. And there was enough. There was enough. There was still some things that I won't touch. The most expensive bottle of wine I ever paid for was a wine to celebrate my 75th birthday, which was in 24. I happened to be in London at the Hedonism Wine. doing some research for an article on Chardonnay, Oregon Chardonnay.
And what's Hedonism Wine? Is it a wine shop?
It's a wine shop in Mayfair.
Ah.
And if you're ever there, you should go.
Yeah, it's a beautiful neighborhood, too. Mayfair is quite posh, as they say.
It's very
quite
posh. and 2 stories. And I'm done, doing the interviews for my thing. And I said, do you happen to have any 49s that will not require me mortgaging my house? And so they popped up on the screen, and there was this 70 that was, in fact, 250 pounds. I said, okay. And they pulled up 2 of them, and we were sitting there looking at them at the ullage and so on. And I pick one bottle. That translates to $316
American.
And American.
At 30% Canadian.
Not Canadian. And we got it. And again, we wish we gotten both because it was fabulous.
Oh, wow. And the ullage, that's the part, the oxygen space between the cork and where the wine comes up to on the shoulder of the bottle. How is that?
It was that. It was well above. It was practically normal.
Oh, okay, great. Because that will give you an indication of oxidation if there is any, yeah.
That's my sole criteria. Well, pretty much my sole criteria now when I'm buying something old. Because I got burned for my 70th birthday. I got one where it was too low and the wine we choked it down, but it was pretty much gone. We should have gotten both. The wine was acquired from the cellar of a collector who probably got it when it was released.
Great provenance. Yeah.
Yeah, 1951. We picked the one with ever so slightly higher fill, and we should have just bought both because there's enough life there for at least another 5 years. Could have made it to my 80th.
Well,
but
the memories will last till then or longer. Yeah.
Yeah, the wine held up. We didn't decant it. We got the cork out intact, which took about 10 minutes.
Oh, really? Did you use that tong kind of, I forget what they're called, that specialty cork?
They call it a Durand.
Oh, that's right.
But rather than pay $150 for a Durand, I saved the screw from a rabbit contraption that I had, slipped it into that which you hang shades up with. Those are the wings. Manually screwed it in. And I was working with a colleague from the tasting room who was stronger than I am. And then we went around with an ASO, which is how a Durand works.
Right. Only an aerospace engineer could come up with that.
Yeah, it worked. It worked. And it didn't, and I saved the $150 for bottles of wine. You usually worry about a wine that old decaying. It actually, over the hour, got a little better.
Really?
By the time it was gone, it was pretty damn good.
And was it mainly structure, tannin, and acid, or did it have any fruit left?
It had complexity. One of the things that changed in my palate over the year is that I don't crave fruit. Mm-hmm. I prefer savory elements to a wine. Or things like truffle,
right? Mushroom, the forest floor, those things that come through over time. Yeah,
umami characteristics and so on. This had that. There's a word I use for wine. I've seen somebody else use it too, especially ones that are venerable. Wisdom. The wine acquires wisdom. Yeah, it's not brash. It's not in your face. It says, sit with me for a while and let's have a olfactory conversation. Watch me as I change. And this wine did that. As fragile as it might have been, it changed. It came back to the beginning of conversation and then it went someplace else and so on. I love older wines and I'm aging Oregon Pinots now, which can age fabulously well.
How long can they, it has to be well-made, but what's the potential there for well-made Oregon Pinot?
20, 30 years.
Oh, really?
I'm drinking 11s now, which was a cool vintage. I recently had a 10 that was fabulous. The oldest one recently was 20 years old, an 05, was drinking just great.
Is that mainly because of the acidity?
Acidity and tannins, right? The structural elements are required, the two, and they change character. They get wise. Oregon generally has more fruit than Burgundy, although not as much as California. There are savory elements, especially if you do things like whole cluster fermentation. So the fruit becomes drier, muted, and all of these other beautiful elements come up.
That sounds marvelous.
It
Now,
is.
that descriptor, which I love, wisdom, is kind of almost seemingly the opposite of another term you came up with in your Devil's Wine Glossary, a cheeky sort of tongue-in-cheek definitions of wine. I probably not get this right, but kaleidofactic? Is that?
Kaleidofactic. It's a word that I coined. And so far, I'm the only one who uses it. I put it out there. I wrote an article that ended up in the book. Again, being a mathematician and being anal about precision in language, because in math, the first thing you do before you try to prove theorems or come up with anything else is have an explicit definition of something, unambiguous. So people would describe an aroma as kaleidoscopic. Well, I'm sorry, scopic applies to eyesight. A kaleidoscope you turn for eyesight. So I said, what would it be as the aroma changes? So I came up with this Franken word,
Yes, you're putting them together.
Well, put them together, or one actually is of Greek origin and the other is Roman or Latin origin. I banged them together and it sounded good.
Yeah.
And then I wrote an article about it, which ended up in the book, and I use it from time to time. For a while, I was a field coordinator for the Slow Wine Guide, which forced me, as hard as it was, to taste at various wineries. And I've dropped that term when I've had a wine that really stood out in the fact that the nose changed so dramatically over time. It just made it interesting.
Yeah, no, I love the word kaleidofactic.
Kaleidofactic. You can use it if you want to.
Thank you, if I can remember how to say it correctly. And then I'll have to footnote it to give you credit, the way they do in academic papers.
Right.
What are maybe one or two other definitions that you came up with in the Devil's Wine Glossary that you like?
Well, there's a word that isn't in the glossary, word war, I used when I was describing British wine writing. That
war? How do you spell that?
It's word with war afterwards. It's like terroir, only it's word war.
Oh, okay. Word war. Okay.
The other words in the Devil's Dictionary are not original to me. There's an article in there in defense of describing wines as feminine, masculine, and sexy. Yeah, so those words are in the Devil's Dictionary.
And you say you included them because, I don't know, you like to poke the bear, or at least professional offense takers. So what is your take on describing wines as masculine or feminine?
I don't like to tell anybody what to do. And the article talks about why I finally had to write that piece. There had been a piece in Wine Searcher that I found irritating, but chose to ignore it because everybody's entitled to their opinion. Mm-hmm. What really pushed me over the edge is when there was this whole session for the Wine Writers Seminar, which is held once a year in Napa. I don't know if you know about it.
I do, in Meadowood, yeah.
Yeah, precisely. Yep. Mm-hmm. And during COVID, they put it online so anybody can attend.
Yes.
And they dedicated an entire session to picking apart people's choice of words. It was too cancel cultural-ish for my taste.
War, yes.
It was too much like, oh, you can't use that word because it offends somebody. You have to be mindful of the fact that the world is bigger and we have folks who don't know what gooseberries taste like, or people who don't. One of the panelists said, I'm uncomfortable about talking about sex. Fine, I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about wine and describing it as sexy because it's sensuous.
Sensual,
You know,
yeah.
um, or what is female wine? What does a feminine wine mean? What does a masculine wine mean?
Hmm.
Especially now when people are trying to mix up genders or divide them and so on. I said, I thought to myself, enough. You write you, I'll write me. If you use a word that I'm unfamiliar with or uncomfortable with, either I'm obliged to go look up the fruit that you're using to describe it with, or I say, okay, that's your opinion and this is mine. Typically, we use words metaphorically, right? I also have a thing about minerality, as you
Oh, yeah, I don't
probably.
like that term at all. And several people have been on the podcast talking about it and how faux science and everything else it is. But it's a metaphor.
It's a
If you want
metaphor.
to use it as a metaphor, fine.
It's and that's fine. But really, you're obliged to tell me what it's a metaphor of, right? But with the feminine and masculine, after the article came out, I had somebody asked to be removed from my list who called me a toxic male, which is couldn't be further from the truth. I have two smart, beautiful daughters, and my department at the Miter Corporation had 40% women who were brilliant. I'm the antithesis of a toxic male. So I removed her from my list because that's her right. But I also had people love the article. And it wasn't just folks on the right. It's folks in the tasting room who I would bring it up to and so on. The bottom line in all of this wine language, and I have issues with tasting notes anyways, but if you're going to write them, write write how you want to convey it. Realize that you may or may not resonate with somebody. People who are wrapping the whole world in political context, they get to do that, but it's not your job to cater to that. If they want to take offense on behalf of the nameless masses, that's their right, but it should not prevent you from using a term that's meaningful to you, that can convey at least your metaphor. When I say masculine, I have some specific notions. When I say feminine, I do. When I say sexy, there's a sultriness to the wine that it's either tactical or olfactory or something.
Yeah, no, I addressed that in my book as well, because it was, as you know, you reviewed my book, and I think thank you, and I think there's a difference between when we're talking about a wine, when we're talking about a person too. So, and we get a little bit mixed up with the two, that the language can be different in different situations. But let's talk about something that I don't want to miss because this time has flown, Neal. You are very much an advocate for social justice. So, Jesus Gillian asked you to write the original article about this a big acronym. I don't even know if you say it like this, but AHIVOY. So, the Association of Hispanics de the wine industry in Oregon. And the idea was to educate vineyard workers to improve their station in life. Tell us your involvement with that organization and what it does.
This is with great pleasure. I love that organization. By the way, the acronym AIVOY is Spanish for I go.
Okay.
So that's how I think Jesus came up with it. Jesus Guillen was a winemaker at White Rose, which is the winery that I work at in the tasting room.
All right.
And we became very, very close friends. His brother works in the tasting room. He was a brilliant winemaker, fabulous guy. And he and two other Hispanic folks in the wine industry, Sofia Torres McKay and Miguel Lopez, sat down one day and said, okay, we made it in the wine industry. How can we help the folks, the vineyard stewards, the folks who work in the fields, without whom there would be no wine. And they came up with the organization, the purpose of which is to introduce them through education to the full picture of the industry that they are the foundation of.
Right.
And I became involved because I was doing wine writing. Jesus was a fan of my writing. And they decided at one point that they wanted to get publicity for the idea to see if they could use that to gel, to actually cause the organization to be birthed. And they wrote to Hilary Berg, who was the editor of the Oregon Wine Press at the time, and said, we want to do an article on this. And he said, sure, it should be somebody who can speak Spanish and so on. And I don't speak Spanish, although I tried to learn some. And Jesus said, I want Neal to write it. And that's how I started. So there's a very famous photographer, Andrea Johnson, who's Oregon-based, who was commissioned to do the photography. I wrote the first piece, which was published under the title Breaking Down Walls. But it introduced the idea. We did beautiful profiles of each of the founders. Unfortunately, this was in 2018, came out in August of 2018. In November of 2018, Jesus fell sick with a rapidly spreading form of cancer called soft tissue carcinoma or something like that, and died 6 weeks later. He was 38.
Oh, my goodness.
Before the organization actually came into being. I was tasked with writing his obituary, which is also in the book. The idea percolated. His widow, Juliana, picked up the mantle, and the three of them finally, a little less than a year, well, about a year after he died, I think incorporated. There was then a fundraiser for it, which I covered and wrote. And the first class happened right when COVID hit.
Oh, wow.
It started and then it stopped just before they graduated. But I covered all of this, and all of the articles are in the book. I was taken because this was a case of paying it forward, of not looking for handouts, not playing the victim, but playing the victor. We're going to take control of the circumstances. We're going to do the best thing you can for people, which is give them some education and let them pick where they wanted to be.
Sure.
The organization has become wildly successful. It's gotten lots of press. I was on the board up until a year ago, November. I dropped off because the book was going to come out. I also travel a lot. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go, I'm going to leave it to something else. But I still, as a sort of emeritus board member, I'm kept apprised of what's going on. I turned the writing, when I became a board member, I turned the writing over to Greg Norton, who does the coverage for Oregon Wine Press now.
Oh, terrific. That's a great story.
Yeah. I just love the organization.
Absolutely. Neal, we're going to have to do part 2 because I haven't got to half the questions, but I do have to wrap this up. But your book is fantastic for anyone who wants to just dive in. It's kind of like a box of chocolates, but nice wine, a great wine theme. You have so much history and wisdom and knowledge. I highly recommend your book, Grape Explications, which has just been published. Where can we find you and your book online, Neal?
So you can just Google me. I'm not hard to find. I have a LinkedIn page that has my contact information. Email is best. I always answer email. I make sure that I pull it out of the spam folder. The book is available worldwide. You can order it at your bookstore. I'd like to give a shout out to Académie du Vin Library, which carries the hardback. It's available on Amazon. You can order it directly from Ingram Spark. So it's not hard
All
to
the
find.
places, yes. All the online bookstores, and you can go to your local bookseller too and order it.
Order it. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Neal, this has been such a pleasure. I love connecting with you. We've exchanged emails over the years, but this has been a great conversation. So best of luck with the book. We have to pick this up, though. There's so many things I still want to ask you, but I'm sure the book will go well. And I'll say cheers for now.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed our chat with Neal. Here are my takeaways. Should wine competitions give judges the option to say that none of the wines in the category deserve a medal? According to Neal, you should be able to say none is your option, that you don't want to vote for any, and then have everybody else ranked underneath that, either equally or otherwise. The paper he wrote with his friend John Nettrar, who got him into wine, examines that in great detail. Suppose a judge who ranked a wine in the 60s really didn't like any of them, but was compelled to rank them. He could put in none as first and rank the others underneath, whereas those in the 90s would have none at the bottom because he liked all of them. In the 70s, there might be none in between. And then you aggregate, and none turns up where it is. And then you have your overall ranking. Number 2. Why have some classic wine regions become inaccessible price-wise while others remain within reach for wine drinkers? As Neal explains, the notebooks provided him remarkable data on his tasting history between 1969, when he began, and the present. He was able to drink fabulous wines like the classified Bordeaux Growths, a 25-year-old Burgundy for $19. It was still a lot of money, but in today's dollars, still relatively affordable. So he wondered if any of those wines were still available and what would they cost today. He went through Wine Searcher to see what was available and did all his descriptive statistics. He also looked at his current inventory. And basically where he netted out is that most of those classic wines are unaffordable, but Germany is the one where it remains accessible. The prices haven't gone crazy. And number 3, what does it mean for a wine to gain wisdom as it ages? I love how Neal explains this, that a wine gains savory elements like truffle, umami, etc. It's not brash, it's not in your face, it says, sit with me for a while and let's have an olfactory conversation. Watch me as I change. That's lovely, poetic. Statistically poetic. If you missed episode 244, go back and take a listen. I chat about should you buy wines based on competition medals with Dr. Winnie Bowman, Cape Master from South Africa. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite.
That's what's interesting for me about competitions, is that I taste different flavors. It expands my own tasting memory for when I taste South African varieties. It also reminds me of the quality of our wines and whether we are actually on a par with the world.
You don't wear the same perfume every day, or you accommodate to it, sort of cellar palette. You're trying different flavors, scents, aromas. You won't want to miss next week when we chat with Sarah Heller, Master of Wine, on the shape and texture of wine. To give you a taste of future guests, we'll have Michael Finnerty on pairing wine and cheese, Dr. Charles Knowles, who has published a best-selling memoir, Why We Drink Too Much, Marisol de la Fuente on the wines of Argentina, Alan Ramey, author of the new book on pressing matters about starting a career journey into the wine world, and Nicole and Ramon Bassett on tasting victory, the life and wines of the world's favorite sommelier, Gerard Bassett. Do you have a question for any of our guests? Please let me know. Do you know someone who'd be interested in learning more about tasting wine, especially wines that can rock your world? Please let them know about this podcast. Email or text them now while you're thinking about it. It's easy to find the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. Just tell them to search for that title or my name, Natalie McLean Wine, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, their favorite podcast app, or they can listen to the show on my website at nataliemclean.com/podcast. Email me if you have a sip tip question or you'd like to win one of 3 copies of the books I have to give away. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on this episode or if you've read my book or are listening to it. email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com. In the show notes, you'll find a link to take a free online food and wine pairing class with me called The 5 Wine and Food Pairing Mistakes That Can Ruin Your Dinner and How to Fix Them Forever at nataliemclean.com/class. And that is all in the show notes, my friend, at nataliemclean.com/377. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps a wine that engaged you in an olfactory conversation. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.